Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club, and I'm pleased to present our series, Supply Chain and Logistics, the Storytellers. It's brought to you by Cap Logistics. Cap Logistics, they're experts in offering you customized transportation solutions for all of your needs. So please visit caplogistics.com today. All right, so I'm excited about today's topic, and we have a terrific storyteller. We're going to talk about smart mobility, kind of 2019 and beyond. It's a great topic, and I'd like to introduce Kellen Pucher of Panasonic. So, Kellen, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Doug, really happy to be here. I'm quite excited.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Smart Mobility at Panasonic. So that's terrific.
Correct. Yeah. I'm working for a new office that we have set up here based out of Denver, Colorado, that's focused principally on smart mobility for Panasonic. And I wear the hat of Director of Strategic Initiatives.
Yep.
Effectively, that means I'm wrangling the ecosystem of partners, both technical and actual users of smart mobility systems.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good. I like the term wrangling.
Wrangling, that's what it feels like sometimes. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Before we jump into our topic, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got in this industry.
Sure, yeah. The route by which I came to smart mobility was certainly not a straight line. I actually graduated school. I went to Miami University in the Midwest in Oxford, Ohio. I know, Miami of Ohio, a little confusing for folks, but I studied biological psychology, a little bit of neuroscience, and a thematic sequence of comparative religion. So nothing whatsoever to do with technology per se, or certainly not transportation and mobility, right? But after school, I spent some time in the Bay Area working for a light biological technology company, analytical sciences, and supporting that field. And more recently in Denver, I worked for Level 3 Communications before they became CenturyLink. So really focused on the network side, the fiber optic side, which I think dovetails nicely into a career in smart mobility since connectivity is key.
Yeah, excellent.
Yep.
So the question that we were talking about before was Panasonic, right? You know, when I hear the term Panasonic, I think of audiovisual and things that you would buy for a consumer. So tell us a little bit about how Panasonic got into the smart mobility space.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one we get off the top frequently when we're kind of pitching smart mobility and talking about our role. So effectively, Panasonic is 101 years old as of March of this year. So we're up there now, a little long in the tooth, if you will. We certainly have a history as a technological innovator in the hardware side, right? So everything you're referring to. But I think that as the rate of change and innovation really starts to accelerate, we're looking at how do we leverage that history into digital platforms and really that fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution that's occurring around us. So kind of looking up stack in terms of how do we serve, how technologies actually impact our lives.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back and just talk about the term of smart mobility and what does that mean? You hear all kinds of cool buzzwords about autonomous vehicles and things, but kind of on a broader level, when you say smart mobility, what does that mean to the average person?
That is a great question. So yeah, we're seeing smart everything today, right? We see smart cities, smart utilities, smart mobility, which is what we're talking about here. To me, I think it was captured best. Mark Andreessen was pretty famously quoted. He said, software is going to eat the world, or software is eating the world. And I think that that's certainly true. And really smart anything is when you're talking about utilizing sensors, connecting data, managing all of that data in a way that really digitalizes what are historically kind of our analog day-to-day experiences. And I think the same is absolutely true of smart mobility. So the way that we think about it, can you utilize vehicles themselves, the operators, the institutions in the system actually using transportation networks to feed out data as they're utilizing the system? Can you connect all of that? And ultimately, what do you do from a digital platform perspective to manage all of that data for a meaningful outcome related to safety efficiency? So that's really kind of how we're thinking about smart.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's very good. So what type of trends, I want to jump into kind of our topic, right? So we gave a quick overview. Maybe there's one or two, maybe even three little snippets of like, okay, here's the connectivity and this is really cutting edge and we're going to see direct impact to the consumer in 6 months or 9 months. So like, give us two or three trends that you're seeing out there that are really going to jump out in the forefront.
Yeah. So we were talking kind of off camera right before the show about one of my personal passions. One of the trends is definitely electrification of the drivetrain, right? For a host of reasons, I feel pretty strongly that electric drivetrains are probably a magnitude of order better across the board than internal combustion, again, for a host of reasons. But the other two trends that we're really tracking on right now are, I would say, connectivity, which is, again, where Panasonic is heavily invested and where a lot of our work lies, which is, again, unlocking that digital data, utilizing the users of the system as the sensor set for how it's behaving in close to real time. And then ultimately, how does that really segue into autonomous systems? I think that connectivity and autonomy are really, really important because of the hidden cost to utilizing transportation systems around the world. Mm-hmm. We're familiar, of course, with the costs of owning and insuring a vehicle, the actual time spent in traffic. Certainly the DOTs, the different roadway operators are familiar with the cost of maintaining this physical infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
It's enormous. It's very expensive. But I think the real cost is over 1 million lives lost every year globally as a result of, frankly, human error in terms of how we utilize these systems. Dialing that into North America specifically and here in the US, we're actually seeing an unfortunate increase in terms of the number of fatalities out on our roadways. So we're up over 41,000 fatalities here in the US. Mm-hmm. To give you kind of a counterpoint comparison for what that means, if I were to tell you that 737 full of people was going to fall out of the sky in just the US every other day, I don't know about you, but I would cancel every business trip, every family vacation. We would not be flying, right? But from a top-line number standpoint, that's what's happening in transportation. And I think that engaging connectivity and ultimately autonomous vehicle systems is how you're going to bring that number down to as close to zero as we can possibly expect.
Yeah. And is that is the safety a huge factor? Is that one of the driving forces with
Absolutely.
The connectivity?
Yep. I bring it up kind of at the top because there's, of course, benefit from an ecological standpoint when you talk about, more efficiency in the system, less idle time, less CO2 and greenhouse gas produced, right? There's the time-saving aspect as well. Just, again, an efficient system, but lives lost, it's the time-old cliche, but you can't really put a price on that. So bringing that number down is kind of our first primary focus.
Yeah, that's interesting because you always hear about gas emissions and the environment piece of it, but that's almost just right. You can't see the forest through the trees. That's a huge win, if that's the right word to use, to save lives out there. So I had not really thought about that.
No, without a doubt. Yeah, I think, the fact of the matter is this technology exists today. The ability to connect vehicles has existed for several decades. Autonomous vehicle systems are coming. And I think that utilizing both of those technologies creates a synergy whereby, again, I think you can start to drive that number as close to zero as possible.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. So you have all these systems out there that's connected. Whether it's a system or an individual or whether it's a car, is the infrastructure like the 4G and the 5G that's coming out, is that keeping up with everything? You're sitting there in the airport and your cell phone's not working because you're trying to do your emails. I mean, there's a lot of data that's getting pushed through, quote unquote, the network. So do you have any information about how that is growing to support all of the information that's passing?
Yeah, so there's really a couple of ways to solve this, right? There is the 4G, 5G aspect, and 5G, of course, being more nascent, and it is on the way. We're actually working with a couple of telecommunications providers, pretty significant logos that you would recognize from cell phone, data carriers, who are looking at deploying 5G assets. And can you actually monetize those 5G assets early by supporting, for example, connected vehicle? Because you're talking about a lot of data transmission.
Yeah.
But there's also another ability whereby the roadway operators themselves, so the departments of transportations or these cities that actually manage our traffic networks, they can actually deploy kind of more localized communication that can capture this data as well. So there's a couple of different ways to slice it, but all of these are relatively new technologies, and it's really about speeding deployment and then also kind of creating the business use case for those.
Right. Good stuff. So this is a little off topic, but I've heard 5G a little bit more and everybody talks about a game changer, and it's the magnitude of is just off the chart. So can you talk a little bit about 5G and what that means? Like, what is it doing that would enable it to be able to handle the increased data flow?
Yeah, so to be fair, I'm not a technical expert when it comes to 5G, but from what I understand, effectively you're deploying a host of small cells, so it is a more localized communication. You need a robust fiber optic or other network to provide the ultimate backhaul, but it's just really increasing the throughput for that actual data, so enabling you to transmit more data more quickly. For transportation, it's really impactful because you're starting to talk about, how do you capture some of these use cases? How do you manage this data in as close to real time as possible?
Right.
And when you're talking about driving at 65 miles an hour, real time, low latency is required.
Right.
Those are really table stakes. So that's why we're really invested in looking at 5G as a solution.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of cool stuff that's coming out there. So there's obviously some challenges that we run into, whether that is policy or funding and stuff like that. So maybe what are a couple of challenges that the industry is going to see with this mobile technology?
Oh man,
or mobile connectivity. I'm sorry.
Yeah, totally. So as it relates to connected vehicles, I can give you some specifics around some of the challenges we're seeing from a policy and a legislative perspective. Right?
Okay. Yep.
So first, let's talk about the benefits of connectivity. So when you talk about having connected vehicles, meaning that all of the sensor sets in the vehicles, all of the software that's already in our modern cars is now creating data and sharing it out to the cars around them and also to a broader network so you can manage it in close to real time. When you've got that deployed at scale, you're talking about reducing 80% of non-impaired traffic crashes. 80%.
Wow.
So if you do a quick back of the napkin sketch, because impairment is a part of and is a function driver for some of the fatalities we see. But I think you're talking about saving something like 20,000 lives with just connectivity in advance of autonomous systems, right? So the benefits are enormous. What I would compare it to here is in 1968, we mandated that every single vehicle rolling off the lot had a seatbelt.
Right.
In 84, we began mandating at the state level that you have to actually utilize the seatbelt, right? We were expecting under the previous administration a similar mandate that this connected vehicle technology would be embedded in every single passenger car rolling off the lot from your dealership as soon as 2021. And under the current administration, there's been a little bit of a stall out in terms of the appetite for new federal regulation. So we've seen that kind of sit in proposed rulemaking. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit of a challenge, right? If we can actually kind of advance the industry at that federalized level, it creates some business efficiencies so that all of these different automotive OEMs can start to produce and embed this technology and effectively mandate that they're all speaking the same language. So all of these things are working in concert to really create that symphony that'll capture those safety benefits.
Right.
Beyond that, looking at the autonomous systems, these are incredibly complicated systems, right?
Yeah.
Incredibly complicated. So there's a little bit of a challenge in terms of just getting our legislature to the point where they're able to kind of preside over or effectively manage deployed rollouts of these types of systems. So there's some challenge there, but there is an appetite for that, we do find, in particular at the state and the local level in terms of building that level of expertise. And beyond that, I think it's a question of what do you do with all of the data from these systems, right?
Sure.
We're talking about AV and connectivity. If you've got all this data transmitting, what are you going to do with it as a roadway operator? Do you have a digital platform solution that can make something meaningful out of it so that you can actually pull levers and modulate safety and efficiency on the roadway? So again, there's a huge appetite for that as well, but there's a lot of challenges here. And a lot of it is kind of a growth and an education curve.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the legislative front, I'm just trying to think how that would play out a little bit. Is that going to be like a state type of mandate? Like car insurance is all state regulated. Is it going to be that this state will allow autonomous vehicles to do these type of things?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be more federally mandated? How do you see that playing out, if that's the right question to ask?
No, yeah, it's interesting. So what we're actually seeing is we are kind of seeing this grassroots kind of state approach whereby a lot of states are now formalizing connected and autonomous vehicle coalitions, which are designed to kind of investigate the industry, propose localized rules and mandates for how we're engaging the transportation system from a legislative perspective. But ultimately, personally, I think that some of this will have to come down from the federal level. When you talk about implementing these technologies at the scale of, for example, like a Ford, a Toyota, these other OEMs, right, who are manufacturing vehicles, they want to see that the car that they're selling in Colorado is going to be applicable and useful in California, Arizona, Texas, wherever, right? So mandating some of this technology at the federal level creates that business efficiency and really gets it out there and deployed at scale as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. And right now there's entities that are just trying to create awareness, so those legislation proposals will come to the table? Or okay.
Yeah, that's exactly effectively where it lives right now. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let's talk about maybe some success stories or some different pockets of the country or even the world in some instances that are kind of on the cutting edge or the forefront, like, hey, these guys really got it, and here's what they did.
Sure.
And here's the direct benefit that's been generated. So do you have any examples or some things you could share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about connectivity as a prime example, right? And talking about these connected vehicle systems that we're working on. As far as some success stories, there's quite a bit of pilot activity going on nationally. So US DOT actually funded several different states to do these pilot studies. Key example here, New York City. So New York City is connecting a fleet of taxi and other public kind of transit agency vehicles. They're looking at deploying some of these localized networks to capture all of that data. The use cases that they're solving for there are pretty interesting in that nationally, 14% of traffic fatalities result from pedestrians. In New York City, it's 73%, as you can imagine,
Yeah,
right? It's a walking city. So they're looking at how can they utilize these systems to increase compliance with new lower speed limits for taxis and things like that to try to bring that number down. Another case also from this US DOT pilot fund is the Tampa-Hillsborough Expressway. They're deploying connected vehicle technology to ensure right-of-way adherence because they've got lanes that they can actually switch throughout the day in terms of which direction traffic's able to flow. Looking at some use cases also for pedestrian safety, engaging their transit systems, their trolley systems, and things like that with connectivity. And then our neighbors up north, Wyoming, they've got a stretch of I-80 where they're looking at freight and logistics applications for connected vehicles. And then one last one, which is really compelling because it's homegrown and a lot of work has been done at the state level, is Utah. Okay. So Utah has a connected corridor, and what they're looking at is really interesting. Can they connect their buses and snowplows to give basically priority during traffic events to keep those buses on schedule and keep those snowplows moving during a snowstorm, right? So how do you increase compliance with schedules and things like that on time for buses? Can you make those systems more reliable and increase ridership as a result? Or can you increase the operational efficiency of snowplows during those winter events that we have here as well? So
yeah, for sure. So dive into that one a little bit more. So like, how would that work? You're saying that the snowplow and the bus would know where each one is, and the snowplow would take priority and basically plow a route? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly right. So during a snow event, what you want to do is you want to basically keep your snowplows in motion without all of that starting and stopping. It increases the efficiency of putting down things like salt and the other substrates that increase traction and also clearing snow, right? So as I'm approaching an intersection, can we make real-time decisions about traffic signal control to give priority to keep that snowplow moving? Same for a bus, but kind of a different application, right? I want to keep my buses on time. If the bus is falling behind, can I recognize that in the network so that I can give some priority or modulate how that traffic signal controller is operating in close to real time to keep that bus moving and get it back on schedule? And in so doing, I can then get my riders to work on time or however they're using the system more effectively.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And the connectivity is doing that automatically. It's not a human in a board saying, oh, this bus is slowing down, and they're pushing buttons to turn light. That's the whole connectivity piece of it, and that's how it operates. There's
really different ways to do it, right? So not to make it too much of a Panasonic commercial, but what we're working on is basically a data management platform called Cirrus, which collects all of that connected vehicle data and feeds it up into functional outputs. That can be driven into applications, which can actually apply machine learning, artificial intelligence, or other algorithms to modulate that independent of actual human interaction. Or you could be feeding that to an operator sitting in a network operations center somewhere who is actually kind of pulling those levers and making some of those changes or implementing a different traffic management plan. So there's different ways to slice it from a business logic perspective.
Yeah, interesting. So do you know any more details on the I-80 corridor about the Wyoming experience? Is that kind of what they're doing there with allowing traffic to continue to move?
Yeah, as I understand it, they're really looking at how can they implement this, again, on snowplows, but also on tractor trailers. As I understand it, I-80 in Wyoming, they have a lot of winter weather events, really high winds, and a lot of blowovers. So can they detect kind of those inclement weather conditions in close to real time? Can they communicate that to the freight industry, again, kind of in advance to make better decisions about how to use the network?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. A lot of our audience is listening from a logistics, obviously supply chain perspective. So, if the wheels ain't turning, you're not earning from the driver. So if they're idle or not moving, that's hard dollars in their pocket that they're not gaining. So that's
right.
interesting.
So actually on that, if you don't mind, since it's applicable to the audience,
absolutely, yeah.
I can't announce with whom, but it is a major logo that is multinational in the freight and logistics. We're actually going to be engaging a partner in that to equip some of their fleet with this connected vehicle technology and setting them out into the wild as early as kind of for the Christmas rush this year.
Excellent.
So there is definitely an appetite for understanding how connected vehicles and that technology can really impact freight and logistics. And stay tuned. We'll have some announcements about that, I hope, in the next couple months. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Working hard on it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
One of the partners I'm wrangling.
Nice. That's great. So let's go back one more example on the New York City one. You talked about 73% pedestrian situations. So what exactly is New York City doing? Did you say they're just slowing the taxis? You said the taxis are connected. I didn't quite get exactly what was happening there.
So I want to be very clear, of course, that I'm not an expert in the New York City project, but I do have a kind of an understanding, a cursory understanding from the industry. So as I understand it, one of the applications that they're interested in is potentially lowering the speed limit in some of the main corridors in New York City from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour, and then increasing compliance with those new speed limits. In other words, can I give taxi cab drivers a notification that they are not compliant with that new lower speed limit? So can we increase, how they're operating their vehicles to bring down those speeds to decrease the number of pedestrian instances of fatality on the roadway?
Okay, so it's not they're not trying to take it from a punitive perspective, like
Nope.
You're just an awareness, so you can change your behavior.
Yep.
And kind of go from there.
Yeah, part of the connectivity is not only utilizing the vehicles as a sensor set, but it's also, can we integrate with existing screens that we already have in vehicles? So your heads-up display, your anything that we call an HMI in the industry, a human-machine interface, which is fancy for a screen or audio alert. But can you just simply communicate data in real time to the driver so that they can increase, again, their compliance with how we think they should be utilizing the roadway?
Yeah. Interesting. So specific to Colorado here, maybe just another couple of minutes that we have. What are some cool things that are coming down the pike that if I'm a citizen of Colorado that I would be seeing with some of the smart mobility? So
not to overstate our role in this, but Panasonic did put their smart mobility company headquarters here in Denver.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's up Pena Boulevard, right?
That's right. Yep, out by the airport. So we are trying our darndest to make this kind of the epicenter for smart mobility nationwide. Part of that is really, again, engaging those technology partners. So on the private side, I'd share with you, we brought, for example, an AV shuttle company called EasyMile. They are now they're based out of Toulouse, France, but they're now headquartered here in Colorado for their domestic headquarters with us. They have an AV shuttle actually deployed right now that you could go ride, and it is the first time application where it's connecting, for last mile connectivity, a train station, the A line, to a bus line. So really solving that last mile connection standpoint. And this is an autonomous vehicle that's deployed today.
Right now.
Running out on our roads. Any citizen can go jump on and can take a ride. Yep.
That's interesting.
Out by our facility. So that's one example, right, of that application. The other is engaging Ford, for example. We have a public partnership with Ford now for a data sharing agreement. So really looking at, in absence of that mandate that I'd mentioned on connectivity, can we engage these OEMs? Can we engage the market to create the structures that encourage them to embed this technology? Can they familiarize themselves with the technology and how it's going to impact their users, those that are consuming their vehicles? So looking to leverage that up into other OEMs and kind of build a coalition of folks on that front.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if Silicon Valley would be the right analogy, but maybe it is with Denver and smart mobility.
We're trying our best to make Denver effectively the Silicon Valley of transportation. So we're working on it.
That's terrific. So, well, I can't thank you enough for coming in today. If some folks just want to learn more about what's going on out there, is there any resources or websites you could direct our folks to learn more about smart mobility?
I believe that we have a Panasonic smart mobility website, and I can give that to you, and we can link it. I actually don't have the URL off the top of my head. I'm sorry. So I'll provide it to you, and we can include it in any sort of show notes or things like that. Otherwise, come out and check out our facility. We do have some public engagements pretty frequently out there where we're giving demonstrations of our technology and kind of talking through what we're up to and what we're building. And then, of course, take a ride on the AV shuttle from EasyMile.
Yeah.
That would be an easy way
I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Come get a flavor for the next generation technology.
That's cool. Well, it's awesome that Panasonic selected Colorado to really engage, and I
Yep.
really appreciate you and your outreach to help our audience understand what's going on.
Absolutely happy to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
And I want to thank our audience today for joining us on the Connect and Collaborate Network, featuring supply chain and logistics, the Storytellers. We had a great story today. So again, thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks.